What has happened in Afghanistan in the recent weeks is a tragedy. It's in the first place a tragedy against people, against women, against children, against men as well, against each and everybody who wishes just to dwell peacefully in Afghanistan. For the vast majority of citizens of Afghanistan, even while it was that easy for Taliban to take over the country again, we have to recognize that over 20 years the West had spent on average 300 million euros a day into that country, into that society. And obviously the West as a whole, the whole political West, failed with its endeavor there. I guess we have to be true to ourselves about that, and true also to the people in Afghanistan and in the region. It's no surprise to me that the so-called government of Afghanistan, the Taliban government, is not inclusive, as you have said, is without any female representative, and among other things also, let's say, presenting the world with the typical Taliban Islamistic ideology as we know it from the past. If you ask, and you have asked it, whether we should talk to them, I just share my feelings at first. When the High Representative of European Union, Spanish Commission member Josep Borrell, at first mentioned that now we would have to talk to Taliban, I was really, I was sad. Because that's not my approach to the political landscape, that it would be any time necessary to talk to people who present the world with an ideology of terrorism, a harmful ideology against our civilization. But when I had a second thought on it, it was clear, and it's clear to each and everybody who is reasonable on this planet, we will not recognize this ideology. We will not recognize Taliban with this ideology as a proper, reliable political power. But if there is nobody else to talk to in a country with 38 million inhabitants, which Afghanistan actually is, then we have to talk to the ones who represent that country. And at this very moment, this is this so-called government, the Taliban government. As mentioned, the tragedy is caused by all the political West. And I would not, let's say, only put the shame on the United States. I would even not only put the shame on NATO. I would also have a lot of self-critics on the European Union and on all parts of political West in the first place. Secondly, as already mentioned, this is a country with 38 million inhabitants. So there are so many people. That's not just a little evacuation in the times of crisis. It's a huge country with a huge number of population. And this is why, in the first place, we have to do our best to put the Afghan people in the position to be able to dwell peacefully in their own country. But we also have to take care of those who are extremely vulnerable and extremely in danger at the moment, since they have helped the political West and its entities in the past 20 years. This is the field of evacuation. It's not yet the field of migration or of asylum. It's the field of evacuation. And then I have to share the full picture with you, because what you have mentioned is maybe a part of the picture, but not everything. Austria is already taking care of the second largest number of people from Afghanistan among all EU countries. Only Sweden is taking care of more people from Afghanistan, and already on the second place comes Austria. So my home country, our government, our society has a lot of experience with people from Afghanistan, and is also taking care of them properly, as we always try to do with migrants in Austria and hopefully all over Europe. when it comes to migration, not evacuation, but migration, the neighbor countries of Afghanistan play a crucial role because they can easily treat migrants even if we pay for it, and this is also true. We did it in the past, we do it today. We had our issues and tensions with the Turkish leadership and with other leaderships of other countries regarding migrants. But when people from Afghanistan would come to Central European countries, this usually takes a lot of risks for them in the first place, because smugglers are the ones. It's organized crime, and a terrible kind of organized crime to smuggle people from one place to the other, to lead them into illegal migration, to let them pay for that even if the journey is risky. And unfortunately, as we all know, people sometimes die on these journeys. We have to avoid that as best as we can. In the first place, to convey the message that many would not have any asylum right in Europe, to convey the message that if migration is really necessary, if somebody has to flee, then the neighboring countries are important. To convey the message that the borders of Europe are controlled pretty much, and to convey also the message that we try to take care as a European Union via development aid, via economic relations, via cooperation with the neighbor states in the framework of our moral responsibility. But let's say migration or even illegal migration to Europe is not the only solution and can't be the solution for this large number of people from Afghanistan. Thank you for drawing the attention this broad historic dimension of what's happening in Afghanistan today, and it's really sad. It saddens me, at least, that on the day of the 20th anniversary of this awful anti-civilization attack in NYC, we have this situation in Afghanistan today, and Taliban taking over the country again. We have not yet talked about that today, but we have to do also everything we can to avoid that it becomes again, let's say, a breeding spot for terrorism. And I know it's easy to say that. It's much more difficult to work into that direction, but we have to do it. What Europe has hopefully learned, I would say, from this attack on 9/11, 2001, and other attacks, is that there is some kind of ideology called Islamism, which is ready to do brutal attacks against civilians, which is targeted actually against our kind of civilization, the so-called Western civilization, also against the values of the political West. We have mentioned it already today, from human dignity to individual freedom, democracy and rule of law. And I will always distinguish, that's important to me, between this ideology of Islamism on the one side and the religion of Islam on the other side. They are two different things. There are Muslims on this planet, and they are people we must respect, as we respect each and every person, no matter whether this is a faithful person of any religion or not. We respect Muslims. This is also, I would say, part of the values of the political West, which we try to defend. And there's a completely different era where religion is misused via this brutal ideology, and that's Islamism. And if we understand this framework, and we maybe can better understand it if we listen to people in France who are affected by terrorism, to people in the Middle East who are affected by this kind of terrorism. If we understand how easy it was for Taliban to take over the country again because of their brutality, and because people know that they can expect severe brutality from their side if they don't behave as they want, then we have to understand that this is a huge endeavor to defend the before mentioned values, to fight always this kind of terrorism, and always to fight for religion and freedom of religion, freedom of belief, always to fight for the dignity of Muslims, for the dignity of the religion of Islam, which is a completely different field as the Islamism, as the misuse of religion and brutal ideology. I don't want to scare anybody, and I would, in the first place, say there is no reason to be extremely more scared today than yesterday. But what we have to understand is that security risks are rising all over the planet. And they have been rising for many years now due to new forms of what experts call hybrid warfare, disinformation, trying to divide our societies, also even the European societies, division between member states, between institutions, even division between people within families, and so on. These are attempts against Europe, against all the Western civilization. And of course, the situation in Afghanistan is, among other things, a tragedy in the first place, of course, for the people there, but secondly, also for the security of all of us, of all the world, actually, and especially also for us as Europeans. But we can't change the past, and we can't change the security risk from one day to the other, but we can do our utmost to be prepared. And that's, I guess, the huge political responsibility on each and every level of politics, in the executive branch as well as in the legislative branches, that we deal with these risks by preparing our societies as much as we can against attacks of whatever kind, of hybrid warfare, of terrorism, or of whatever kind. And yeah, in that sense, security risk has risen due to the situation in Afghanistan. But that's not a reason, let's say, to lean back or just to be scared or afraid. No, that's a reason to act accordingly, to be prepared.